Recently, we took a look at the best and worst castle bosses from every Mega Man game 1 through 11, so naturally it is of course time to take a look at the ugliest castle boss from every Mega Man game 1 through 11. Haha. You know, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, or as I like to call it, the good, the bad, and yo mama. Haha. No, I'm just joking. That wasn't serious. Obviously, that was a joke. I would never say that, unless of course you aren't subscribed, in which case... Mega Man 1, the first Mega Man game ever made, only has 3 castle bosses because we are not counting Dr. Wily, of course, but even if we were, that guy is handsome. Also, before we get into things, I just want to apologize if I sound weird. I've been really sick, and honestly, it'll be a miracle if this releases on the Saturday it's supposed to, which is the 24th, so check the description. If this is released on the 24th, that's crazy, because I'm really sick. But anyway, starting off, we of course have the Yellow Devil, and while I like his design and think he is super iconic, he is pretty ugly. He isn't atrociously ugly to the point where seeing him causes nausea or anything, but he is far from being attractive. I do like his design, and I feel like it serves its purpose very well considering he kinda has to be a blob thing due to all that separating and reconnecting he does, but he just isn't that pretty. He does have one eye, which is probably his best feature, but his eye is very scary and creepy. It just kinda stares into your soul in a way that feels like he just wants to kill you and get the fight over with, which again is fitting for his whole design and vibe he has going on, but it's not really going to help him very much with his Tinder profile if you're asking me. I'm not sure if I'd call this guy the ugliest castle boss in the game just yet, but he's certainly a pretty big contender. Next up we have Clone Mega Man, and this guy obviously is not ugly. I wouldn't say he's super beautiful or anything, but I mean, he just looks like Mega Man, and Mega Man is cute, so yeah. I guess if we're basing this off of his concept art, he should look a little bit different than Mega Man, but he's still far from being called ugly. Lastly though, we have these bubbles with these machines inside of them, and honestly I think they look cool. This thing is far from humanoid, so it's hard to call ugly or pretty, but I think it looks pretty interesting. Seeing the mechanical machine thing inside of each bubble is pretty cool, and the colored dot in the middle of each of these bubbles gives every single individual bubble a unique feel, so I don't think this guy can really be considered ugly. Meaning of course, the Yellow Devil is probably the ugliest. Now look, I like the Yellow Devil as I feel like I've made clear in my last 2 videos, but come on guys, he is pretty ugly. Again, he's not hideous or astonishingly horrifying looking, but when compared to Clone Mega Man and some cool bubble robots, he doesn't really stand much of a chance. So I'm sorry to say this, Yellow Devil, but you are unfortunately the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 1. Mega Man 2 is an amazing game and commonly held as one of the best in the entire series, but which of its 4 castle bosses are the ugliest? Well, let's find out. First of all, we of course have this dragon dude, and this guy is far from ugly. I don't think he's hot or anything, but he looks super cool and is honestly one of my favorite castle boss designs in all of Mega Man. Dragons are generally just a menacing creature as far as video games go, which is why they're pretty common bosses in gaming. But this guy specifically is even cooler looking than most video game dragons. I don't think I would say he is the coolest dragon in all of video games because of, well, Ridley, but I guess we won't know for sure until I make a video ranking every dragon in all of video gaming history. In all seriousness though, I guess you could argue the reason I like him so much is because of the fights being so unique and fun, but even if that is the case, I'd be shocked to hear someone call this guy ugly. I mean, I guess his face looks a little bit goofy, but that's not the same thing as ugly, let's be real. I like his colors a lot, I like the goofy look on his face, and I even like his design overall, so he probably will not end up being the ugliest unless something crazy happens. Next up we have the wall boss, who's also pretty hard to call ugly. This is just a pink room that has wall tiles that disconnect and try to kill you, but neither the room nor the disconnecting wall tiles are very ugly. They're all a pretty color of pink, and even the individual little robots that the wall turns into look pretty cool. I wouldn't say they're as cool looking as the dragon, but I'd be hard pressed to call these guys ugly in any capacity. Like, okay, I guess you could argue that they're a little bit creepy similarly to the Yellow Devil, but I just don't agree. The Yellow Devil is one menacing weird looking dude with an eye that stares right through you, while these guys are kind of cute if anything. Next up though we have the Guts tank, and while I do like Guts Man and I wouldn't call him ugly, this is not the best angle to say the least. The tank itself looks cool, and the concept of a giant tank centaur is definitely fitting for a castle boss, but I just feel like his mouth is too big. That's not the only reason I think this guy's a little bit ugly, but it does certainly stand out. I'm still not sure if I'd call this guy the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 2 just yet, but he's already a pretty good contender on account of his face. Lastly though, we have the Boo Beam, and while this is the Mega Man community's least favorite castle boss of all time, I don't think I can call it ugly. I mean, it's just a room with orbs in it. Sure, it's not beautiful, and Wily 4 has made me hate this shade of purple, but how could you call this ugly? The blue orb things aren't ugly, the room isn't ugly, and the crash bomb blocks certainly are not ugly, so I don't really even know what to say about this guy. Like, obviously old Boo Beam here isn't going to be the most beautiful castle boss, but that's a video for a different day. Anyway, I think most of us saw this coming, but unfortunately the Guts tank is going to have to be the ugliest castle boss. Again, I do feel bad saying this because I am a pretty big fan of both Guts tank and Gutsman himself, but like, look at his big ugly face! You can't tell me this guy isn't the ugliest castle boss for Mega Man 2, so I'm not even going to try to tell that to you guys. Meaning Guts tank is officially the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 2. Mega Man 3, more like Mega Man, P. Okay, I'm sorry, that was too far. Due to not counting the Doc robots, this game only has 3 castle bosses, so let's get right into things. First of all, we have the Turtle Machine, which is a classic. I've already said a few times now that I'm a pretty big fan of this boss, and part of the reason for that is probably because he's not very ugly. Well, at least the turtles aren't ugly. I guess the machine that produces these turtles is a little bit ugly, but only because it looks like a bug, and well, my subscribers know how I feel about bugs. And I guess once you knock the shells off of the turtles, they also kind of look ugly, but I don't think that's fair to the poor turtles. I mean, if you mangled someone's face and then called them ugly, that wouldn't be fair, right? So I don't think we should consider the shellless turtles in this equation, meaning maybe the machine that produces these turtles could be a contender for the ugliest, but the turtles themselves certainly are not. Next up, we have the Yellow Devil Mark II, and this guy is even uglier than the original Yellow Devil. He's ugly for all the same reasons, except this guy is chunkier in a way that makes me sick, and his uninterested eye makes me mad. Again, I think design-wise it makes logical sense, but I don't care about any of that crap in this video. We're just being shallow and judging these dudes purely off of looks, so because of that, this guy is now the top contender for being the ugliest castle boss from this game. Lastly, we have Clone Mega Man Part 2, and yeah, Mega Man is still cute, so this guy is not ugly. In the concept art, I think these guys have red eyes, but that just reminds me of the Sharingan, and the Sharingan is cool, so there's no way this guy is going to be the ugliest. Meaning, of course, the ugliest castle boss is gonna have to be the Yellow Devil Mark II. I mean, I don't know what you expected. Again, the turtle making machine is kind of ugly, but its hideosity is nowhere near the level of the Yellow Devils. So once again, I'm sorry to all the Yellow Devil fans, but since we aren't counting the Doc robots, this guy is the ugliest. Though, if we are counting the Doc robots, they might honestly take the cake because my goodness, those guys are real ugly. But yeah, unfortunately, the Yellow Devil Mark II is gonna have to officially be declared as the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 3. Mega Man 4 is the first Mega Man game to have 2 separate castle bosses for us to go over, but I think we all know Mothra is going to end up being the ugliest, but that's no fun, so let's at least humor Mothra and take a look at what else this game has to offer. First, we have the Square Machine, which is another full room type boss, meaning it's going to be hard to call ugly. I wouldn't call the Square Machine pretty or beautiful, but who would call this thing ugly? Next are the Cockroach Twins, and these guys are actually pretty ugly. Their legs are weird, and their bodies are even weirder, but we all know I'm biased against bugs, so I won't continue this for any longer. Dr. Cossack and his claw machine is not ugly. Dr. Cossack is a fairly handsome fellow as far as I can tell from his 8 bits, and I like using claw machines, so I like everything about this boss fight and its appearance. Getting into the Wily Castle though, we have Metal Daddy, and I don't know about you guys, but I like Mets. In fact, I like Mets so much that I already made 2 entire videos dedicated to them, and I may even make more in the future if that's what you guys really want to see. Meaning this guy is not ever going to be the ugliest anything on this channel. Lastly, we of course have Taco Trash, and some may find him to be kind of ugly, but I don't. I do think he looks a bit goofy looking, but I honestly like his design overall, so I can't in good faith call him the ugliest. Meaning, just as we thought, the ugliest castle boss from this game is gonna have to be Mothra. I do kind of feel bad making fun of Mothra's looks in a lot of my videos, but then I see this thing's face and change my mind. I'm not sure how a butterfly managed to be so ugly, but this is what I like to call an epic fail. Haha. That's still funny to say, right guys? Anyway, we already knew this, but Mothra is gonna have to officially be the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 4. Mega Man 5 once again has 2 castles for us to cover, which is a trend I wish continued into every single Mega Man game, but as we know, it didn't. Anyway, this game actually has a major lack of ugly castle bosses, which is going to make things pretty difficult. Proto Man's castle only has Dark Man over and over and over again, and none of the Dark Mans are ugly. Dark Man 1 is honestly kind of cute with his little wheels he uses to try and chase you down and kill you. Dark Man 2 is pretty basic, but he's still not very ugly. He honestly looks a bit more like an enemy than a castle boss, but hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Dark Man 3 looks a lot like Vile from Mega Man X, who I think is super cool, meaning there's no way this guy can be considered ugly. And Dark Man 4 has the coolest design out of all of these guys with improved shoulder pads and shoes. But the Wily Castle still has 2 more bosses for us to take a look at. Firstly, we have Big Pets, who may have a weird name, but doesn't have a weird look. I mean, maybe you could say the fact that he shoots parts of his body out at you is a little bit weird, looking similar to the Yellow Devil, but I'd say give this guy a break, man. Haha, get it? You guys know Mega Man 3, right? Lastly though, we have Cirque Ring, and while I do love this guy, I've gotta say, he's considerably uglier than every other castle boss in this game. Now, I'm a huge fan of Cirque Ring, and I don't even think he's ugly, but when compared to Big Pets or any of the Dark Mans, he just doesn't hold up. Sure, he is more goofy looking or funny looking than he is ugly, but he is undeniably less handsome than every other boss in this game, so unfortunately for Cirque Ring and all of his fans, I'm gonna have to officially declare him as the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 5. Mega Man 6 is the final Mega Man game to have 2 separate castles for us to enjoy, so let's enjoy this while it lasts. First of all, we have Rounder 2, who's one of those bosses that's just hard to call ugly or beautiful. Like, this thing obviously isn't beautiful, but is it really ugly? I wouldn't say it is, and it's my video, so I guess that means Rounder 2 isn't very ugly. Next up is the Power Piston, who is kinda in the same boat, but this thing also looks kinda similar to those wall tiles we talked about earlier from Mega Man 2. No? Just me? Alright, well anyway, I don't think this guy is ugly by any means, but it does look a bit basic. I'm not sure how else it's supposed to look since its design is just fine functionally and it seems to serve its purpose, but I guess it could use a makeover. Its one eye is kinda creepy, but it's nowhere near as creepy as the Yellow Devil Mark I's eye, so I don't want to call this guy creepy or ugly looking. Next up, we have the legendary Matonger Z. We here on the Tooterp YouTube channel love this boss, and for good reason. He's cool looking, he's epic, he's awesome, he's cool. I mean, what else is there to even say about this guy? He's obviously not going to be ugly, so let's just move on to Mr. X. Now, Mr. X is pretty handsome for an old man, I guess, but the face on his ball thing is pretty menacing. I wouldn't call it ugly, I guess, but it's certainly not pretty or beautiful. I do like the design of this thing though, so I don't really think it's ugly, plus I do like balls. Wait a minute, that sounded crazy. Anyway, I'm not gonna call this guy ugly unless we have some absolute breathtakers in the next castles. Let's move on and see what we have to work with. Firstly, in the Wily Castle, we have the Mechasaurus, who's not as cool looking as Mega Man 2's dragon, but is still generally cool for most of the same reasons. I guess his face isn't the most beautiful thing we've ever seen, and I suppose his neck is a bit long, but I mean, come on guys, he's based off of a brontosaurus, so don't be mean. I guess he does have that weird handle thing on his chest, which is a bit weird because, like, I don't think anyone's gonna pick him up by that thing, but it kind of reminds me of the GameCube, and I like the GameCube a lot, so I'm actually gonna count that as a plus. But anyway, let's move on to the final castle boss, which is the, oh yeah, the tank, quote unquote. Look, I've gone on many tangents about this strange contraption that Capcom refers to as a tank, but honestly, I think this thing might be the ugliest. Even if this thing was not called a tank, its body is weirdly plump and its tripod legs are way too spread out and it just looks awkward. I don't know if that makes sense, but to sum it up, I basically just don't enjoy looking at this thing, and knowing its name makes the sight of it even worse. So because of that, I'm officially declaring this quote tank unquote as the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 6. With the NES castle bosses taken care of, it is of course time to go over the rest of the series' ugly castle bosses, but first, all of our eyes need a break, so here's my wiener dog. Take a look at him. I know your eyes need a break, so I thought my wiener dog would help. Okay, you can get down. If you say he's ugly, you're banned. I'm banning you. Mega Man 7 is of course the first mainline classic Mega Man game on the Super Nintendo, and this game has 3 castle bosses for us to go over. Now in my videos on the best and worst castle bosses, I did not count the Hyena squared thing because I thought it was a Wily boss since it looks like a Wily machine, but apparently it isn't one, so I will count it in this video. But I'm still not going to count Base because he is a sub boss or mini boss, you bozos. First off though, we have Gutsman G, but unlike the Guts tank for Mega Man 2, this guy's face was scaled proportionally. Sure, he does have some big ol' arms if we're gonna start talking about proportions, but like, I think that actually makes him look cooler. Obviously, Gutsman doesn't have the prettiest of faces in the world, but on Gutsman G, I think it looks pretty good, so I am not going to call him ugly just yet. Next up, we have the Gamerizer, who's just a turtle. First off, I like turtles, so it's going to be hard to call this guy ugly, but this is a pretty ugly turtle. I mean, look at his face. He has a squiggly mouth, a big ol' hooked nose, and I don't think turtles are supposed to even have noses like that, are they? I wouldn't call this guy ugly either if I'm being completely honest, but as far as turtles go, he's far from being the best looking. Lastly, we of course have the Hyena squared thing, and this guy just looks cool, okay? Sure, it does have a menacing face, which I'm sure those with weak spirits may call ugly, but I like the look of this guy a lot. He is one of the coolest looking castle bosses in all of classic Mega Man, so I mean, it's gonna be really hard to call this guy ugly, so I'm not going to. But which of these castle bosses is the ugliest? Well, this one was actually a pretty hard one to choose, but I'm gonna have to go with the Gamerizer. If this guy looked like a regular turtle, I would have gone with Gutsman G as the ugliest, but he doesn't look like a regular turtle. He looks like an ugly turtle. And because of that, I am officially declaring the Gamerizer as the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 7. Mega Man 8 is a pretty decent game, but we aren't here to talk about that today, so let's get started with its castle bosses. First of all, we have a Titamino, and I hate how this guy looks. His face is so ugly, I just want to punch it through my screen, and his boss fights makes it even worse due to being so boring. Like, genuinely, I have a question for those of you watching. Why does a Titamino's face look like that? Why? This guy is probably the ugliest castle boss from this game, but let's continue on just to be sure. Next up, we have the Bai King, and while I don't like this boss fight, it's certainly not ugly. All my gripes against this guy are just because of the fights being kinda stupid and boring, but design-wise, this guy is alright, I suppose. Lastly though, we do have the Green Devil, who I actually think looks pretty cool. I know I've been complaining a lot about how devil bosses look in this video, but this might be one of my favorite ones in terms of looks. The color green they use is really fitting and somehow makes the fact that he morphs into chunks a lot less gross. Plus, his eye has the same expression as the Yellow Devil Mark II from Mega Man 3, but somehow this one looks way better. I can't really explain that, so you're just gonna have to believe me. Anyway, obviously a Titamino is the ugliest boss, but I didn't want to cut this entry short, so yeah. I just hate how this guy looks. If you like this boss, I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but you're stupid and you should feel bad. Joking aside though, without further ado, it's officially time to declare this boss as the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 8. Oh yeah, Rockman and Forte time. You already know what time it is. Unfortunately, this game also has a Titamino, so yeah, that's the ugliest castle boss from this game. Because Rockman and Forte is so much cooler than Mega Man 8, though, a Titamino is accompanied by Monk King A in this game, which is great because I like monkeys a lot and I don't think this guy is ugly at all. But a Titamino still is ugly, so yeah, a Titamino is still the ugliest castle boss from Rockman and Forte. Mega Man 9 brings us back to only 8 bits, but continues the trend of having 3 castle bosses. First off, we have the Spike Pushers, and while I enjoy this fight, I will say the Spike Pushers themselves are kinda ugly. They aren't hideous by any means, but they're certainly hard to call handsome, which in my humble opinion means they're at least kind of ugly. I do like this boss though, so if you're a fan of the big ol' Spike Pushers, please don't take offense. Though I would prefer if this guy would stop pushing his spikes onto me. I'm not interested, alright? Next up, we have the Mega Mecha Shark, or as I like to call him, I'm just gonna say it, this guy is beautiful. I love the colors on this thing, I love how it looks in general, and I even love its incredible length. Wait a minute, that sounded extremely wide. Anyway, I am a big fan of this castle boss, as you can probably tell, but I seriously love his design. Taking up multiple rooms is a pretty unique design choice that I enjoy a lot, but even if he didn't, he just happens to be one of my favorite colors, which is this really cool shade of blue, so yeah, this guy has a lot going on for him as far as not being ugly goes. Lastly, we of course have the Twin Devils. These guys certainly aren't as ugly as their other devil brethren, but they also aren't nearly as cool looking as the Green Devil from Mega Man 8 and Rockman and Forte. Here's where this gets kind of tricky though. I do think this boss is fairly ugly, but it's pretty much a tie between the Twin Devils and the Spike Pushers. Honestly, I kind of want to hand it to the Spike Pushers for being less ugly since they're kind of cute a little bit, but at the same time, I don't want to just say every devil boss is the ugliest castle boss from this game, similar to my worst bosses video, so I'm gonna have to give the tiebreaker to the Twin Devils, meaning the Spike Pushers are actually the ugliest. I do feel bad for doing this because they are just a little tiny bit cute, but they're also simultaneously ugly, which hurts my head. I can't think about things this complicated. So just for that, I'm officially declaring them as the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 9. Mega Man 10, or as I like to call it, Mega Man 9 2, also has 3 castle bosses, so let's jump right into it. First of all, we have the Weapons Archive, which is kinda hard to call ugly or cute because, like, it's just other bosses, but I did already make a video on the ugliest and prettiest Robot Masters if you want to check that out. I'm not going to be considering the actual Robot Masters used in this fight though, because that seems a bit weird and kind of cheating, so instead I'm just going to count these weird little orange spiky things. I don't think they're very pretty, but they also aren't really ugly, so I don't know, I'm kind of stumped with this one, so I'm just gonna call them mid and move on. Next up we have Mr. Krabs. Oh yeah, I like this boss a lot, but I must admit, this isn't the most handsome or attractive crab I've ever seen in my entire life. He just looks kind of awkward if anything. Like, I don't want to call him ugly because I like him, but I also don't want to call him beautiful because he isn't beautiful, so once again, I'm kind of stumped. Lastly though, we have the Block Devil, who is once again very medium or mid. The problem with this guy is that it's just a block, which, like, I see plenty of in Minecraft without any problem, so I don't see why I would call this one ugly. His eyeball thing is also a little bit creepy, but not nearly as creepy as the Yellow Devil's eye, so this guy can't be the ugliest. This is a very difficult entry because everything just looks weirdly basic or mid, but since I do have to pick something as the ugliest, I'm gonna have to go for poor old Mr. Krabs. I'm sorry, Mr. Krabs, but you're the only one with easily definable flaws just because you're so awkward looking. I love Mr. Krabs. I don't even really think he's that ugly, but unfortunately I am going to have to officially declare Mr. Krabs as the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 10. Mega Man 11 is of course the newest entry to the classic Mega Man series and one of my favorite Mega Man games of all time, but it does only have 2 castle bosses, so this should be quick. First of all, we have the Yellow Devil Mark III. Nice. I do think this guy is a lot less ugly than the Yellow Devil Mark 1 and Mark II just because it seems to bode well with these new graphics, but this guy is still far from handsome, so you better watch it, you Yellow Devil, you. Next up though, we of course have Malvern, who's very hard to categorize as either beautiful or ugly. Malvern has a beautiful color palette and I like the design of Malvern, but Malvern also has an ugly face, so yeah, this is a tough one. I have been showing some bias towards liking Malvern recently, and I feel like the Yellow Devil Mark III gets a lot of hate, so just for that, I guess I'm gonna have to unfortunately call Malvern the ugliest. The Yellow Devil Mark III certainly does not look great, but he is the best looking Yellow Devil of the trilogy of Mark Devils, which has got to count for something. Plus, despite Malvern having a pretty decent design, it does look really creepy, especially in the whole face areas, so yeah, unfortunately I'm gonna have to officially declare Malvern as the ugliest castle boss from Mega Man 11. Those were the ugliest castle bosses from every Mega Man game 1 through 11. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, leave a like and comment what video you want me to make next and all that good stuff. And if you didn't enjoy, then your mother is an ugly and vile Mega Man castle boss. Haha. Okay, that was a bit too far. I take it back. I'm just kidding. Even if you didn't enjoy this video, I guess you're entitled to your own opinion or something like that. Psych! I untake it back! If you didn't enjoy this video, frick you and your ugly castle boss mother!